Hey everybody, welcome back to the Premium live stream. I'm your host Nick Taylor, and today I'm joined by two of my coworkers, Bobby and Nikhil. How are you both doing today?
Great. Just so happy to be here.
That's awesome. For folks tuning in, we might rename this at some point, but for now we're just kind of calling it Ship and Chat. And essentially, we're talking about the product sometimes or just interesting stuff in our space. Like we work in the zero trust security space. So that's kind of the format of these for now. So why don't we just get into it? So what's top of mind, Bobby?
Well, I think today, continuation of the last conversation on the updated Beyond Corp document that came out of Google called Beyond Zero. And they were talking about how they were thinking about their updated access model.
Yeah.
Cloudflare, who obviously has, I think I'm going to mess up their product name. It's Cloudflare Access, I believe. And they've had a lot of similar technologies as not only Google, but ourselves, right, on the identity-aware proxy side. And so Matt Silverlock at Cloudflare, who we should try to talk to about this, wrote a paper called, I think you put on the screen, called the Agent Access Model. And I thought, we'd kind of started talking about it informally amongst ourselves and thought, why don't we just chat a little bit about it here?
Yeah, no, that sounds great. And yeah, I dropped the link before to our previous chat about Beyond Zero and stuff. Like you mentioned, Pomerium's based heavily off of the Beyond Corp papers and all the stuff Google did back in the day in terms of defining the zero trust security model. And today we're kind of touching on it, still zero trust, but more in the context of all things agentic, because apparently people are using that AI stuff. So yeah. So I guess, let's talk about Cloudflare's coined this as agent access model, but why don't we just dig into it?
Sure. And I share my screen. I mean, I think it's a lot of the similar ideas, and it definitely harkens back very directly to, in some ways, there's a lot of clarity here, which I totally agree with. So last 12 years, this is not a new security model by any means, but I think Beyond Corp articulated very well initially in the Usenix papers, right? Talking about moving away from trusting the network or where you happen to be on the network as the sole or most important attribute when making an access control decision. And so I think a lot of what I think this paper and the updated Beyond Zero paper is trying to do is take stock of what pulling this through into an increasingly agentic world looks like. And so it makes some points, some of which are obvious right here in the beginning, which is like the big obvious difference here, what's new about the security model, right? So if we're not going to just use network locality as the principal characteristic to make an access control decision, you need to replace it with something else. And the Beyond Corp papers, just in summary, and zero trust, if it's not just a marketing buzzword at this point, is that you replace it with identity and context. And I think something that's less talked about, everyone's talking about identity-aware access, context-aware access, is when and how often things are enforced. And I think identity-aware proxies are able to do that on a per action basis, per request basis. So I think the thing they cover here in the beginning is just the speed of which agents are able to act as one of the big differentiators of this access model, which I certainly agree with. But I think, I'm curious if your guys read this paper. But to me, it's much more than that. I think this overlaps a lot with what we've internally been talking about as to like what, everyone like has this notion of like, we have human identity, we have machine identity, and now there's this new category called non-human identity and what that means. And so anyway, I think this is the paper. I don't know if you like maybe where it makes sense to start, Nick.
Well, I think some of the, I mean, we don't need to reread the paper on here, but some of the things that you just mentioned, and I know we've all talked about, is like the delineation of identity is maybe the wrong way to think about it, when really the question is like, what are you trying to do? Like, what's the access path or privileged access that should be allowed? And then the identity behind it, obviously, like a human can only do so many things within 10 millis, 100 milliseconds, a minute, whatever, whereas an agent can do some insane, orders of magnitude greater than that. So you obviously need to have built in, but if you just say, oh, it's a human, it can have different access pattern than an agent or something, which is where I was like, well, do you really need like an agent access model? Isn't it just access in general? And then you just have and I think promisingly it fits. Cloudflare is a massive company. Pomerium is a startup. It fits what we've been building and doing in our thesis pretty well, which is you trust no one and you evaluate everything on a per request basis. I think that's regardless of who the actor is. But maybe that's a controversial stance too.
Yeah. No, well, no, that's all valid. And I think like in the context of agentic, it's like, there's still a human who's going to say like people have been talking about all these multiplayer things like not Google, Claude Tag, and then Slack just released, I forget what it's called, but like the coding multiplayer bot and stuff. But like, I think it's important to me as a user, I have an identity and I have certain access to do things like you were saying, Nikhil. And the bot or whatever agentic workflow can do certain things, and it's to me, I see it as like the intersection of those two things is what can happen. That's kind of how I've been. I don't know. Kindergarten helped with Venn diagrams, I guess. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the paper outlines like why there needs to be a new framing of an access model and why we can't just like carry over the human access model. And like, I think I maybe agree with the conclusion. We can't just take the human access model and transfer it over to a agentic access model. But I think the reasons they give here, to be specific, are a little bit surface level in my point of view. Like, yes, agents are ephemeral. I don't know if there's a little LLME for sure. Credentials are durable. Like credentials have always been durable. I mean, I'm not totally sure the point they're trying to make here, but I think the bigger point, like around why agents, the agentic access model doesn't transfer from the human access model, has to do with something more subtle and challenging, right? Yes, the obvious thing is that agents act at machine speed. Yes, agents can be ephemeral, but I think their agents aren't just ephemeral, but they're inherently not only like non-deterministic in a way that humans, I think, are more deterministic than we realize, and we actually bake into most of our security models. Most security organizations are still reasonably comfortable with some amount of longer lived access than I think we now inherently know it just isn't possible with agents. Agents, request to request, can behave and operate extremely different in a way that humans don't, unless you're like extremely manic or something like that. Or which is me in this call, and then services are actually even way more deterministic than anything. Like service access is like one of the most tightly scoped things we have. Like service to service communication usually is just calling a function or two and is very tightly scoped. So I think at a surface level, this paper is right. But I think the subtlety here is that agents are much more non-deterministic than other access types.
Well, and I think similar to what we've been espousing and building is they talk about this trust ratchet idea as a I mean, I read it as like a deterministic set of I guess of policies that are never going to change. So like don't trust the LLM to police the LLM kind of thing, or don't trust the LLM to watch over the LLM. At a certain point, there does have to be a human in the loop. You do need to have some deterministic policies that that guide what they can't do, can and can't see, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and they also touch on this, and we kind of talked about it last time too, I believe, Bobby, or maybe I'm mixing it up with another conversation. But like prompting to say like don't touch this, or like agents or harnesses will have hooks, never touch the .env file and stuff. Those are, I feel like they're band-aid solutions. So like the access and like segregating keys and all that stuff, like like separating it from like where it's operating and then proxying to like for example making the LLM call, you even if it tries to get the keys, it'll never be able to get to them. So it's like, and the thing too is when you say don't touch this, it'll be like, oh sorry, I was being helpful, I thought this would be better if I did this for you, and you're like, no, it's like, and here I am rotating keys again. So anyways.
Yeah, I mean, I think this touches on two, like the point two here would be number one for me, which is like enforcement and the trust boundary needs to live outside the non-deterministic, boundary of where the agent's operating. Could be a sandbox. It just depends on what the environment is. But I think that's the key thing, which is anything you cannot trust anything that's in the non-deterministic edge of where the agent's operating needs to be treated like it's compromised effectively. And I think where this is touching on, so credentials to me should absolutely live outside that non-deterministic boundary. Enforcement absolutely needs to live outside that. And what's encouraging to me about this and the Beyond Zero paper and conversations we've been having is people are starting to articulate and understand where each component of their agentic and access stack needs to live. And so we're starting to see that shape up. I think early in people experimenting with agents, there was a lot of hope around, just like agents will police each other, like with guardrails, like that's enough. And like you said, I think the challenge is, or if we just have a better skill, or we're like, it's not trustworthy, right? These agents, you can't non-deterministically coerce these agents to behave well, because by the way, the Foundation Labs would have solved it that way. And as we've seen from the Hugging Face exploit and things like that, that is just like, it feels like an NP complete problem. It's just too hard.
And if you kind of frame it as like, what's your security model? It's a markdown file, skills, like that sounds kind of ridiculous anyways. So, but what was I going to say? I think one thing for me that's validating is like, we're not talking about MCPs today, but like, we've got an MCP gateway now. We've been, beating the drum about, zero trust, fine-grained authorization and tool call policies. And I've seen this at recent MCP events I've been to. A lot of people are finally on that train about fine-grained authorization. So I find that super validating for what we've been doing, because we've been doing that for like since I think last 2 Mays ago. And this paper from Cloudflare, plus obviously the Beyond Zero coming out, it validates like, already what we've been thinking in terms of agentic as well, multiplayer. So it's just kind of nice to see these things coming out, because like, I don't know, I just feel better about what we're doing too, you know?
I think, I mean, one thing I mean, the paper seems to say it's not addressing, or like AAM does not, which is what we need as another acronym in cybersecurity, does not seem to solve or is the multiplayer access control problem. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, I know that's something we work with every day in our environment is using agents in a multiplayer setting. So I don't know why they felt like it couldn't, but that's why I'm a member of the non-technical staff, and I'm here to help everyone feel better. So yeah, so I don't know if it's helpful to like explain, or Bobby, if you have a take on that, like, well, why do they feel like it can't address that?
Well, I think it's challenging, right? I think I think the multiplayer use case lays bare the subtle challenges of doing agentic enforcement, and where, I mean, I think it's a little bit of going back to the original core concept of zero trust and Beyond Corp is like, if you replace network locality with identity as the main source of how you enforce policy, multiplayer makes that identity story much more complex. And it makes it more like a union, a grid, going back to your kindergarten, like overlapping thing. You have to make decisions about identity that are multiplayer, right? And in an agentic action world, okay, so like to make this concrete, the subtlety of it is you have something like Claude Tag. All three of us are in a channel. We're responding to a customer event. All three of us have different accesses inherently in the system. And at least today, all the multiplayer environments are sort of capped at the membership of who's in that channel. So we've now created this like artificial, like pseudo mode, where we've flattened all our identities so that the agent can do what we're asking it to do, if that makes sense. So we've like undone the identity aware access here, and we're kind of cheating, right? Like the cheat here is that we're giving identity to the agent. So there's like the ops, prod ops issue agent that we've like given this new identity, capped at some level of access that we can command, and it's completely lost the derived identity of the people calling it. Yeah. And I think that's a real smell. And so like, it's obviously better if that the person asking for an action, the agent to do an action, that action is independently analyzed based on who's asking it, the context of the agent, the situation itself, like that. If we could do that, that would be a much better access model in this multiplayer environment. I think it's hard, but it's possible. It just that you really have to get these enforcement boundaries correct.
So then in that example, then, and just to clarify for my simple mind is each of those agents are running in their own container or their own segmented environment with policies kind of surrounding them. So how do they actually talk to each other? Is it what information are they allowed to share? What information kind of crosses the boundaries, I guess is my question. It sounds like credentials and the ability to access the raw underlying data does not cross boundaries, but if Bobby's agent or Nick's agent goes and pulls some logs from some backend service and has them, will my agent, who does not have that access, be able to read that same information?
I think that's like the subtlety to solve here, right? So like in what you just described, it assumes three different agents are acting on behalf of each of us. Now that, as you know, that's something we internally, that's how we scope access, right? Where each action has tightly scoped access to the caller, and it atomized down to the thing we're asking it to do. So like that's a us thing, but other products, there is no scoping. Like we're all driving the same agent in the same sandbox with the same tool call controls. It's completely flat. But you've touched on like something I think really subtle, and and the way we solve this is we make the agents communicate in public in the channel. That's the shared communication channel. So context is not implicitly leaked between agents. They have to explicitly communicate in the like Slack channel. It's to be determined if that will be abused too, as we saw in the Hugging Face thing. Like, will they like encode some secret language to then, one agent will hijack the access capabilities of another agent? Like, maybe. And so that is the subtlety of this problem, but at least the boundary is harder and more strict than like running in the same sandbox with the same set of fixed controls. But yeah, I mean, that's the real challenge.
Yeah. And I think like from the UX standpoint and just like how these things work, because like I think everybody that, like people have been using, like Slackbot seem to be like the common theme here, but like it could be in Teams or something else. But, people expect in multiplayer that they can all just chat with the bot and see what's in there, obviously. And I think just to make it really crystal clear how we're kind of doing this right now is like when I ask something, I have different access than you, Bobby or Nikhil, and whatever I ask, it'll spin up, it'll run Sandbox, it'll get the result for the question I was asking. And it's the result that gets displayed in, for example, the Slackbot channel. So I feel like, because you're talking about we're giving this bot a kind of pseudo identity, and it's really more like anybody that's in this channel can see the results of everything people ask. They can't see the actual information that happens in the sandbox to get to that answer, and I think that's like the clear distinction. Like it might say like the pod's down, but like for me to ask that question, I had to, access some stuff in prod that Nikhil can't, but like that still is helpful in terms of like the whole incident response. Nikhil's like, oh, okay, so that pod's down because of this, because Nick found that. And then, okay, we need to fix it. Well, Bobby has access to actually do some right stuff, and we can still see the results in the actual Slack channel where we're all a part of, whether it's a public or private. But to get to that answer, like the pod is fixed now, blah, 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 like you did stuff that me or Nikhil can't do. And then it comes to the conclusion and that's what gets outputted. And I think that's the best way I frame it. It's only the outputs which are shared in this multiplayer kind of context. And it's really to get to those answers. That's when you're on your own doing your digging and talking with that instance of the agent. That's kind of how maybe that's super obvious what I just said, but like it just to kind of, I don't know, make it a little more crystal clear maybe.
Yeah. I mean, it's our best guess at having the multiplayer aspect where the actions are still individually performed without leaking context amongst agents. And yet there still needs to be a coordination layer. And so we force that coordination layer in the channel itself. And again, it might turn out that still isn't good enough, but it's very explicit. And it's just like, it matches how like humans actually kind of collaborate. And, again, short of like embedding white space, or whatever to all of a sudden have a swarm like in the Hugging Face attack. It's a reasonable coordination layer. Something that's stuck in my head is like, if you're familiar with Go programming, it's like communicating sequential processes. And it's almost like Slack threads become the communication channel, that it is at least explicit around an explicit access communication barrier versus like, again, like the hack was like leaving hidden files for the next agent that would come back up and pick it up and complete the work. Something like that is not possible.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's definitely a good read regardless. But yeah, like I said, I'm excited to see stuff like this and like the Beyond Zero paper coming out, because I just feel really good about what we're doing, and I'm excited to share more in the future once we have something a little more concrete in terms of like we have some demos right now, obviously, but I'm looking forward to when we can actually say, hey, get your hands on this and try it out.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know if there was anything else you guys wanted to chat about, like the specifics of this article. I mean, it restates another idea which Nikhil brought up from the Beyond Zero paper that I don't think we need to go like a ton into, but like the trust ratchet. I think like what will increasingly be interesting, which is like something like we've always felt strongly about at Pomerium, which is like doing that authorization on the atomic level with the most context possible. But like there also seems to be a role for like, in the Beyond Zero papers, they call it the ceiling, which is like, okay, let's take a set of actions, almost like a frame or like a 30 seconds worth of LLM prompts and activity, and then analyze that for potential like anomalies and things we might want to escalate. I think that's going to be very interesting, but still very unproven. I have not seen like a real deployment of something like that being attached to like an agentic access model.
Yeah. I'll just share what they were saying about the trust ratchet here. I'll just drop that in the chat, but yeah, it's and they're talking about like execution based on a task, but a task could be multiple things. We're really, maybe I'm confusing what they're saying by task, but for us it's literally every, not request, but like every question we ask. So maybe that's considered a task. I kind of understood their task is like a combination of several questions asked, but we're really like nailing it to like the specific current question. Like that gets, you have a question there and that's sandboxed.
Well, it could be layered, right? And maybe I don't remember if it covered this, but a task could be composed of a single prompt that kicks off 100 MCP and API calls. How we think about it is like every single individual API call or MCP call, more likely, is going to be authorized with the full context of the tool call and the prompt. But there is also the case for analyzing at the higher layer. And so, like the task itself maybe is that frame window that encapsulates many, many API calls or MCP calls.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah. It's, I don't know. It's still wild times. I feel it's fun though, but yeah, I think we're just obviously going to see more things like the Hugging Face and other things like that happening. Just, places where we'll learn to just do better, but it definitely going the direction we're headed, and like companies like Cloudflare and like what Google's doing. I think that's, obviously I'm biased, but like I think that's the clear path to me.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I wonder if we can get Matt on one of these follow-up calls, because I definitely have questions about how they're thinking about it. How much of this real is, or just like more just thinking about a future access model, like Google in particular. Not so much in the paper, but in like the marketing piece after. I was like, how much of this like actually exists within Google? Because of course, famously, Uber proxy preceded IAP and the public stuff for quite a bit. It felt like, based on that marketing, it's still very prototypey, especially some of this like machine learning, larger frame window analysis. Be interesting how much Cloudflare is actually built internally, and how much of this matches our own work, which for us, like as an open source company, like everything we do is pretty public.
Yeah.
And so it'd be interesting to see what they've actually done here. And it seems like they're willing to collaborate on some of these access models.
Yeah, I'll definitely. I know a bunch of people over at Cloudflare, so I'm definitely going to hit them up to see if we can have a chat with Matt or at least people in that space. But so that's definitely on my to do. But yeah, yeah, no, it's just cool seeing all this stuff happening. I guess aside from that, we're trying to keep these not too long. So like we've been capping them at about 30 minutes, which is about where we're at. So I guess we can kind of wrap up here, Bobby, unless there's anything else you want to touch on before. Cool. All right. Yeah, I guess that's it, folks. We'll see you in the next one. We're trying to do these weekly. Sometimes we skip one depending on like I'm traveling a lot for work right now for giving some talks and stuff, but we're trying to keep a cadence of once a week. So just be sure to give the YouTube channel a follow. I'll drop a link to that. And yeah, aside from that, we will see you in the next one.